Welcome, everyone. All right, it is 10 o'clock, so let's get started on time.
Cool. Awesome. Well, hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here chatting with you guys today, or folks today. I'm actually calling in from Minnesota. I don't know if anybody else is just not also in Portland, but welcome. Hello from the Midwest. My name is Anna. I am the Associate Director of Client Strategy at Madfish Digital, a values-first digital marketing agency in Portland, or headquartered in Portland. Used to live in Portland, then moved to the Midwest as a result of the pandemic, wanting to be a little closer to family. But before we get started, I do want to just take a quick moment to acknowledge and honor the Wapakute people, Indigenous people whose land that I'm currently on right now. Yeah, we'll jump in. Oh, maybe not. So everybody, I hope, knows what they signed up for, but if not, in big bold letters, we're here to talk about building transformative teams. And full disclosure, I may not be sharing anything that's going to be breaking any new ground today, or tell you things that you didn't already know to be true just as a person in this world. But my hope for today is that you can walk away from this session with a new idea, maybe some added clarity, or just a repackaged application of how you can elevate the teams that you lead or are part of, using a few pieces that have really helped me in my journey. As we dive in, there is going to be some opportunities for you to just join in on the discussion just in the chat. So I would love if you would share, just share your experiences or thoughts over there. And otherwise, we will be opening it up for just a Q&A at the very end. And I did some creeping on who's in the call today or on the call today. And I know that there are just some really incredible folks that likely have some really fun and different experiences to share with us too. And if that sounds like you, feel free to jump in during that Q&A and we can just open it up as a collaborative discussion. But cool. So today, as I said, I'm going to be talking about building transformative teams. And so we'll kick off with what are transformative teams. We'll dive into the 3 keys that I see as necessary for building those teams. We'll talk a little bit about operationalizing those 3 keys, and then we'll get into the question answer little chunk. Cool. We're carved out for about 40-ish minutes or so today. And so I don't know that we're going to need the full time, but we've got it if we need it, and we'll just get into it. So what are transformative teams? The way that I define transformative teams, I define transformative teams as just groups of people that show up for each other wholeheartedly, day in and day out, with intention and purpose. And when I think about what transformative teams are, there are certainly just a few really specific attributes that come to mind for me. It's anything from just like really clear communication to setting really great expectations. But I would love to hear from all of you in the chat. What is a transformative team to you? Think about some teams that you've been a part of that have really been just really incredible, high performing teams. What was it like? Yes, being able to show up as your whole self. Absolutely, completely agree. What else? Open-minded, not afraid to try and possibly fail. Ugh, yes, love. Equal space for all voices, great listening, vulnerability. Oh, yay. I don't know if this person, who was that just dropped that little vulnerability nugget? Rebecca. Do we have another Brene Brown stan? I'm sure there's lots of us in the crowd today. But yeah, all of these things, great stuff happening in the chat, are just, 15 out of 10. Love all this stuff. But when I think about what it means to be part of a transformative team and what it looks like to be wholehearted, I'd love to hear too from you all what that means to you. What does it mean to show up wholehearted for you? Is it the same as what it looks like to be a part of a transformative team? Is wholeheartedness different in how you show up for your team and your folks? Listening and empathy. Yes. Oh gosh, this chat, I feel like I want to like download it all. Yeah, transparency, honesty, bringing your passion, for sure. When I think a little bit about what it means to show up wholeheartedly for my team, I think a lot about being authentic and genuine, really wanting to let go of what other people think, being true to who I am and my values. I think a lot about being compassionate and giving myself and others grace, because we certainly deserve it. We've all got a lot going on all the time. But also with that, being generous in my work and being generous in my thoughts of other people as I'm moving through specifically times of stress or overwhelm. It can feel easy to maybe let that generosity leave a little bit, but it also means being creative. It means letting go of comparison, and the way that you do things is likely very different from the way that I do things, and that's great. And both of those things should be celebrated. The big question, though, is how do we get our teams to show up in that way? How do we get our teams to show up wholeheartedly for each other every single day? I think when I think about wholeheartedness and when I think about being a part of a transformative team, I see it really as a call to action. And that, I think, is really the challenging part, is that how do we get our teams to recognize that ultimately being a part of this team and the culture that we've built here is that call to action for each of us to show up authentically, generously, and creatively. Yep. All right. I'm on the right side. All right. So this is likely not going to come as a major surprise, but the first piece of the 3 keys that I see is trust. It puts the T in team. It's like the biggest one here. This is like foundation team building stuff. But trust really is that basis for creating an elevated employee experience, building high-performing teams, and it sets that foundation needed to design a transformative culture that folks are really inspired and excited and proud to be a part of. Charles Feltman defines trust as choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. And I've actually never read his book, The Thin Book of Trust. But if anybody here, again, little Brene Brown Stan account or session, if anybody here listens to her Dare to Lead podcast, she recently had Charles Feltman on. And it was funny, I ended up actually like going back into this presentation and revising the definition that I had of trust here, because I just loved that one so much more. It just kind of stuck with me. And anyway, we don't need to get into my little Charles Feltman, I guess, I don't know, crush at this point. But anyway, I absolutely love that definition of trust. Trust is risky. Trust opens you up to a lot of potential pain, and that's scary. But you can't ultimately get to trust without vulnerability, and you can't get to courage without vulnerability either. And we'll get to courage in a second, but overall, the impact of high trust environments is felt throughout every layer of an organization. And this doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're working in a high trust space, that everything is going to be roses and cool and calm and collected and easy peasy, but it means that we can communicate openly and honestly without fear of what that repercussion might be. There's so many outcomes or the impact of working in a high trust environment is felt throughout every layer of an organization. Some of those things can be efficient teams, which can lead to higher profitability. It can be increased collaboration, increased employee retention. It's an elevated experience for all of our customers too. And there are just so many more things, like when we're thinking about what trust does for an organization, when used and with the right intentions, I feel like I feel like all the things that we can do is limitless. So jumping forward, when I think about what else is needed to really build a transformative team, we need people who are willing to ask questions, to dig a little deeper, to find out more. The next key is curiosity. In order for us to do our very best work as a team, an organization, as just human beings individually, we need to seek out information. We need to be eager to learn more about whatever it is that's in front of us. especially now as we've been moving through this newish, or at least new to me, world of widespread hybrid work from home. I can't underscore the importance of curiosity more. We are really at, I think it's really interesting. I don't know, but we're really in an interesting moment with more teams across the globe working from home or in dispersed work environments. And as a result, I find it easier, or in my experience, it's been easier, or has felt as though we find ourselves a little bit more removed from our teams and colleagues. And as a result, when we're in states of stress or when we're in states of overwhelm, we can start to tell ourselves a lot of different stories. And those stories can make us a little anxious, and they can make us they can just exacerbate that stress. We can maybe get a little spun up on whatever it is that's running through our minds, or the stories that we're telling ourselves. And I don't know, for example, maybe somebody has just sent me a Slack and I just haven't responded. And when you're in a state of overwhelm or stress and you're feeling already maybe a little bit disconnected, we're all going through this pandemic, you might be telling yourself a story like, oh, is so-and-so mad at me? Like, she hasn't responded to my Slack yet. I'm like, I've done this wrong. I've done this wrong. I've done this wrong. And you just kind of start to tell yourself this story that's really pretty far off of what reality is. And it's like, no, I'm literally just driving. Like, I just can't text you back right now or Slack you back. But anyway, when we get into those moments or in those states of stress or overwhelm, we get less curious. We get less generous in our thinking and how we work with other people. And the antidote to that anxiety and that stress is curiosity. It's just simply asking more questions to get us beyond where we are right now and out of this little storytelling moment. We simply can't find the best solutions or guide or lead others through challenging moments if we aren't constantly seeking new information and learning. Creating a culture of curiosity and learners needs trust to be successful, and it really is the ticket to move beyond what we know to be true today into unlocking whatever our potential might be. I'll leave you with one question that sits with me always. It's like honey, just sits with me. But is how can you stay curious just a little bit longer? What can we learn if we simply ask just one more question to get us a little closer to whatever it is that we're hoping to achieve? The last key for today, or that I'll share today, is courage. Courage is, I don't know, sits right up there with trust for me. And it's something that each and every one of us are working on all of the time. Like, courage shows up so differently for all of us. But when we're building transformative teams and companies and groups, organizations, whatever, we have a lot of hard conversations. And to navigate those hard conversations, we need courage to do so. And as leaders and people who just simply do hard things, we can't move through our roles without it. Simply taking on any type of leadership role is absolutely an act of courage. And with courage, we can do literally anything. So courage shows up for all of us so differently, and again, in varied ways, but it can be, I don't know, talking about how you feel. It can be setting boundaries. It can be asking for what we need, simply just being ourselves and showing up as ourselves fully to work every single day. Like, that absolutely is an act of courage. It can be being kind to others when they're just trying to be themselves. And it's ultimately just learning how to be brave and afraid at the exact same time. It's being wholehearted. And that's simply what we're asking our teams to do every single day when we're looking to build transformative teams and transformative spaces. So, number 3, operationalizing each of these keys. So, I'll be honest, when we're thinking about what it looks like, ooh, this slide is so orange, it's so big. But when we're looking at operationalizing some of these things, it can mean really significant culture shifts depending on what your organization does and where you're at and what your current state looks like. And so that's like big work. That's getting from current state to future state is a big deal. And it takes time. A lot of times with these projects, I think they're just like fun. And so it's just easy for me to think through, I don't know, it's easy for me to jump to solutions before I even think fully about whatever that challenge really is. And I always have to remind myself when we're talking about like, okay, we're building teams, we're doing XYZ, whatever it is, that the urgency doesn't live with the solutioning or the execution, but it lives with the challenge identification. And I think it's Einstein or somebody says that if you're given an hour to solve a problem, he'll spend like 55 minutes thinking about the challenge and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. And I think that that's such an incredible way to think about challenges or think about process when you're building teams, especially like really any bigger challenge or any big organizational opportunity. We want to spend our time making sure that we are just sitting with the challenge a little longer than maybe we think we should. I think that what comes to mind for me with this, and in my experience, it's been that one small issue may actually be a part of a little tangled web of 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 pieces that at this point probably affect the whole team. It's not just me that's being impacted by this. It's not just the people on my team that's being impacted by this, but the other teams and literally the whole organization at this point. And so now when we thought we had just one challenge, one little small thing that maybe was a workflow or a process shift, we actually have one big challenge to solve that's at an organizational level. And these moments in our teams really deserve the time and care and thoughtfulness and intentionality to ensure that we're creating workplaces that are equitable and that also elevate their experiences as employees. So when I'm looking at operationalizing these things, it's easy for me to just think about things in terms of buckets. So what are all the steps that we have to do within one bucket? But our first step is identifying any current gaps that we have within our organization now. So what's our current state? These are some of those tough questions and the hard conversations that I was talking about that really do require courage. What's our current state? What's our ideal future state? Who does this impact? What is that impact? What does success look like? Have we identified the metrics that we want to use to measure when we get to that point in our process? Metrics can be anything from employee turnover to customer churn to team efficiency. It can be that bottom line. It can be just overarching profitability as an organization or by client, whatever works. But next, we really want to develop that roadmap. And the roadmap for something like this can be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to 12 months. It's all going to just be contingent on whatever falls out of that first chunk and that gap identification phase of this. So the biggest piece here is ultimately just making sure that you're giving yourself enough time to be thoughtful and intentional around what you're trying to build. We really want in this roadmap to outline clear next steps for execution. We want to define the desired values and behaviors that we're hoping to see in our teams. We want to have clear ownership of those next steps so everybody knows what they're working on. Even if you need to delegate all of that stuff, you're still the driver of that work. You're checking in on it. You're moving it forward. And then we want to set expectations and realistic deadlines for execution. That's like, I don't know. It's kind of funny to include it in here because we're talking about trust and that's, anyway, I'll just be done with that. But our next phase is just implementation. So when we think about implementing something like maybe a culture change program, or we are looking to make some shifts with our teams, we really want to make sure that we're communicating clear messaging for ongoing team support. We want to ensure that our teams have visibility into those changes. We want to lean into that creativity and curiosity. When we're rolling something out that's got 3, 6, 12 months timelines, things are very rarely, and just literally anything in life, I feel like things rarely go the way that we plan for them to. And so let's be okay with things just going a little bit differently than what we had originally planned. And we really want to celebrate the wins. If we're rolling out a really specific program or project or whatever, let's talk about those things. Let's shout out the people who are doing a really incredible job at that stuff. At Madfish, we have a Celebrate the Win Slack channel, and I know there's a couple folks on this chat from Madfish right now. it's probably my favorite channel on Slack. Like, it's so sweet. It's so incredible. I mean, at all hours of the day, it's just literally shout outs, all things yay, like, hey, Jeanette, great job on XYZ, or I just watched you move through this client meeting and it was so incredible. We also do spend a good probably 40 minutes during our quarterly all team strategy sessions doing team shout outs where we celebrate people who are living out our values fully. And I feel like we always just like budget like 25 minutes for this. And I swear it takes 40 minutes every time, but it's truly the best part of that meeting. It's so fun. It's so great to see everybody just kind of light up and feel good about all of the work that they're doing. And then last, we also will do in our exec team huddles, we actually do a ton of shout outs there too for all of the teams that we're leading. And I think it's so important for us to be shouting out the names of our teams at big tables with an organization. So let's elevate those voices. Let's bring those people into those conversations and just share all of the good stuff that they're doing. The next piece is measurement. And so we want to go back to those success metrics that we developed during that gap identification phase and measure how these things are impacting our teams long term. So one thing that can be really great at this phase is implementing a series of employee surveys or just on our Wolf Pack, which is the team that I lead, the client strategy team at Madfish, we do a scale of 1 to 10 to see how people are feeling every day. But one thing we also will do, and that we use at Madfish, there's a ton of cool tools out there that are really great. And we at Madfish use a tool called Office Vibe. I am not like here to plug Office Vibe. I don't have a referral code, but maybe I should, I don't know. But I do think it's a really great tool for seeing how our teams are ebbing and flowing with the times and how they're feeling about all of these things that we're rolling out. We use it to look at our employee net promoter scores. And if you're not familiar with what that is, I definitely recommend just kind of doing a quick Google search on net promoter scores and ENPS, employee net promoter scores. But it's a good way to just gauge employee experience, and it's all anonymous, at least Office Vibe is, but you do have the opportunity to open up additional conversations with folks if the person who submitted any feedback is open to doing that. But ultimately it just touches on everything from like relationship with manager to trust between peers to mission, vision, values work. And that's such important just context and information to be just gathering all the time. And to wrap things up, so a couple questions that I use when I'm trying to get my brain going, and I said that there are some people from Madfish on this call, they're probably so annoyed seeing these up here on the screen, but they really are just like great questions to get your brain going, to think about these pieces and this puzzle in a way that maybe takes you outside of your comfort zone. A couple of my favorite questions that I've listed here are like, what are the biases that I have? Like, what's in my, what can I not see right now? What are the stories I'm telling myself? What does success look like? What are the behaviors that build trust? What are the behaviors that break it? Thinking about a lot of these things can help us find just the solutions that we're looking for to really build those spaces where people feel good, like they can come as their full selves to work. And last, literally my last slide. Oh man, look at me go. I just want to say thank you so very much for your time today. Hopefully you're walking away with a few pieces that stick to you, just like some of those questions from Charles Feltman are sticking with me, or his trust definition sticks with me. I think we have like 10-ish minutes to go through maybe a couple of questions and do a little discussion. I dropped my social media deets on here if you have any follow-up questions that we don't get to during our QA, but yeah, otherwise, thanks so much.
I haven't seen any in the chat so far, Anna, so I can get started with one. You know, as you're leading a team remotely, how do you help, how do you have team cohesion when folks are having a bad day and you're in different locations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, the way that I feel I can best support my team when they're kind of going through it is just giving them time and just making space in my schedule, in my calendar, in whatever it is that I'm working on to just make space for them. I don't know, I think that we all, well, I'll speak for myself. I certainly care really deeply about my team, and I really care about the experience that they're having throughout the day. And so, yeah, I think it's honestly just giving them time, just to listen, just to hear them out, to just let them know like, hey, like this is a space that you can come and share your experience with me. We also do each week, we have our Wolfpack huddles, which is a space and time where the team knows that they can just come however they want to come and show up to that meeting and share with us, the group, just how they're doing that day, any challenges, stucks, whatever it is that they're working on, and we go from there.
Dee in the chat wants to know if you can share the deck later. They can't take screenshots of Zoom because of privacy settings.
Oh, sure. Privacy. Yep. Big deal. Yeah, absolutely. I can shoot that out.
And Julie in the chat says, do you have recommendations for fostering emotional intelligence among team members who tend to be more guarded?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let me think about it quick. What comes to mind, and please, Julie, let me know if I don't answer your question. What comes to mind for me with this is just modeling the experience that I want my team to have. I don't think that that necessarily means that you need to overshare, but I think that it means that if we're showing up in a really genuine and authentic way, our team will follow suit. And I think that there are some pieces that are just out of our depths as managers, like that it's okay to also just not necessarily have answers for everything, but simply just being there as somebody who can listen and who can support and who you can make changes with the pieces that are within your control. But yeah, I think leading by example, yeah, not necessarily having answers for everything, but having answers for the pieces that are within your control, and yeah, just being a listener.
All right, any other, got one from Rebecca. Can you provide examples of ways you've managed conflict in teams? How have you operationalized that?
Yeah, we have a process like when we have conflict amongst teams and like cross-departmentally. The way that my team is structured, there's usually not like conflict between folks on my direct team, only because they don't work directly together on any projects, but cross-team and cross-department, we generally will, and my initial response to any conflict is just like finding out from the person on my team, like, hey, like, give me the context. What's the color here? What do I need to know in order to make some moves or help you kind of figure out what's next? I'm very much a person who will give my team the opportunity to resolve those conflicts on their end first. And I like to just set that expectation like, hey, my default is always going to be giving you the tools that you need versus me jumping in right away. Just we're all adults here. Like, let's just talk about some stuff. If we're talking about just like normal kind of like interpersonal challenges, but otherwise, if we haven't necessarily seen any success with that route, then we'll just pull the whole group together. So myself, the person on my team, their manager, the other person, and we'll just have a conversation about it. I think that oftentimes conflict arises between team members as a result of a lack of communication, and that's a pretty easy fix usually. Like, oh, I thought you meant this, or I thought you meant this, and we just simply aren't clear, and we're just like missing each other like ships in the night. And whenever that happens, it's resolved fairly quickly on that front. If you have a specific example, I might be able to provide some more concrete feedback on that, but or thoughts on that, but yeah.
Well, we're waiting for Rebecca. Anna, I have a question for you. Most of the conversations around management that I've had lately in conflict, or at least trying to build strong teams, have been to build strong teams across virtual platforms. I was, I'd say, completely shocked to read that only roughly 13% of America is still working remotely.
Oh, wow. I'm shocked to hear that.
Yeah, it was a lot of people, think that other people are still working remotely when that's not the case.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you are seeing building teams that are eventually going to come back together, especially when folks may have been only knowing each other through work. Do you have thoughts or tips on building teams when people may have never met face to face before?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So at Madfish, we are choosing to move forward with like a hybrid work space. And so we have our headquarters in Portland, but as a result of the pandemic, we've made the decision to just go fully remote if folks want to go fully remote. And so we've actually been hiring folks all across the country, and we've had people join us from Nashville and then spend the summer elsewhere and then come actually end up moving to Portland. We have some folks over on the East Coast right now. And so for us, it's ultimately just continuing to make space for each other to connect and have conversations and just make space for each other in our day-to-day lives. We try to stay connected on all of our platforms and tools. So like Slack, Asana, we do like virtual coffee dates, things like that, little virtual happy hours, those types of things. But when it comes to being in person, the biggest thing that we've been trying to be mindful of is just the experience of our remote team members, and then also the experience of our team members who are going to be in person or working out of the office, and making sure that they're having an equitable experience at Madfish. We don't want our remote teams to feel completely disconnected just because they're remote. Like that's not cool. That's not the experience we want anybody to have on our team. And so I think it's just kind of going back to maybe some of the questions, just like is asking like, okay, what does equity look like when we're on a dispersed team? Like what are we missing here? And pulling the team. We've done quite a bit of just like conversation having around what it looks like to go into a hybrid work model. So we've had a couple different conversations, done multiple surveys, like what does the team want? What do people feel like they need in this space? And just hearing directly from them. But if somebody else in this chat has a much better example, please feel free to jump in. But that's my experience, and that's what we've been working on.
Thanks. That you actually started to answer one of the questions that popped into the chat while we were talking. Autumn had asked about what are the most important steps to equity in remote work. It seems like this is an area that folks have a couple of great questions about. Let's see, I'll go back up a little bit. And Dee had asked if you've seen any impact on conflict resolution, whether it's slower or harder in remote environments where people don't have to see or interact with each other throughout the week.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's just been slower because we are kind of going back to that, what I had said about feeling more disconnected from the day-to-day and more disconnected from your teammates, is that it does take longer, I feel like, to maybe get things resolved or to push messages out in a way that people don't misunderstand what you're saying or misread, or like the way that, like, to make sure that you're communicating it clearly so everybody is getting the same information and interpreting it the same way. So I think it's just honestly just about taking a lot more care with the words that you're choosing as you're doing some of that conflict resolution when you're in a hybrid workspace or when teams are remote.
That's a great tip. Jacqueline asked, how do you maintain and model boundaries with a remote team?
And I guess I kind of have a little bit of a follow-up, but I mean, I think that just being upfront with whatever you need is going to be the best. I mean, that's just, I think if you need to, if you're signing off at 5, like you're signing off at 5, like that's another piece of that. Like, it's, I mean, to me, it's really just about communicating whatever it is that you need in the moment, and also giving your team the space too to communicate whatever it is that they need, and making sure that they feel heard and listened to in that. If people are just like signing on or signing off at like 9 at night, and it's just like, hey, like you simply don't need to be online like at 9 at night, like please shut your computer, like we need you to take some time off. The most that we can do is like encourage people to take their time off. At Madfish, we have unlimited paid time off. And so it's really, really, really important to us that people take the time that they need to live their lives outside of this space. Like work isn't everything, like you're a human being outside of here. And so be a human being outside of here. All we can really do is just encourage that, and just make sure that like, if we're still seeing that happen, like, let's just have a conversation. Like, hey, the story that I'm telling myself about you being online at 9 at night is XYZ. I don't know. It could be anything like that. Or, hey, something came up and I want to check in with this. I know your values are XYZ. You being online at 9 at night maybe doesn't seem like it's in line with that. Can we talk about it? Or, I don't know. There's all kinds of ways that we can kick off conversations around what we're hoping to see with our teams. And yeah, just encourage that. And if we're still seeing it, let's just have a conversation.
Okay, we have maybe time for one more question. What are some of the other things you've been facing at your workplaces that you'd love to get Anna's advice on?
And feel free to come off the mute if you want.
I know we're also well trained to keep our mute buttons on.
Oh, that's a great question. How do you translate wholeheartedness and curiosity to client work or external teams? Just literally just question strategies and just asking more questions. And like, when we think we know what it is the client's asking, like, what does it look like for us to ask one more question? So like, hey, here's what I'm thinking for XYZ. Oh, well, can you actually just like paint what done looks like for me on that? And have them just like tell you everything. What are they actually hoping to get out of this report? Or client asks you for, I don't know, this is a bad example because I just said report, but client asks you for a report and they're really curious about one specific metric. Tell me more about this metric. Tell me what this means to you. What does this look like? And how does this translate to your day-to-day? Are you working on something internally? I think it's just a matter of not assuming and not making assumptions and just simply asking questions.
That's great. If anybody else has any more questions, feel free to pop in the chat now. Keep an eye out. Otherwise, we can begin to wrap up.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, awesome. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you all so much for your time today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Build conference. And Karin just popped the main room link in there. So see you later. Thanks for your time.